And you're not seeing, okay, yeah, looks like it's working. Got it. Oops, I'm trying to click this little thing off. There it goes. Okay, cool. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me and Lauren for the invitation. This is a lot of fun. Thanks to all of you for hanging out, spending your Monday afternoon, talking about first-time donors. I'm Steven. I'm gonna be here talking about first-time donors, as you know. And if you have any questions, feel free to chat them. I've got the chat pop up on, ask away. That won't bother me at all. We can save some time at the end for questions, and I don't mind asking or answering questions as we go along. But yeah, we're gonna have some fun over the next hour or so. And if you're watching this as a recording, connect with me later on. Even if you're watching this, months or years down the road, it would still be awesome to hear from you. So first, thank you all for what you do. This was an easy yes for me because I love environmental organizations. That is a cause really close to my heart. And anytime I can talk to you folks who are literally saving the world, right? We say that about nonprofits, but you all as a subset of nonprofits are actually doing that. So thank you. So let's dive in. We'll have some fun here. So a little bit about me. I've been working in the nonprofit sector for about 15 years now. I wrote a book a couple of years ago, which you can check out, touches on some of the things that I'm going to talk about here. You may know me from Bloomerang. I spent the last 10 years at Bloomerang. It's a donor management software provider. Do some volunteer work for the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. We're going to talk about their research, and also have been involved with the Capital Campaign Toolkit, which is a really cool resource for those hoping to find some help on their capital campaigns. So check that out if you're interested in that, or if maybe you got a campaign coming up sometime in the future. So first-time donors. Why talk about them, right? We can talk about a lot of different kinds of donors. We can talk about major donors, we can talk about monthly givers, capital campaign donors, and that would all be a really good use of time. But I like to talk about first-time donors because when you think about all those other types of donors that I just mentioned, they all have one thing in common, and that is that they started off as first-time donors, right? All of those awesome, sort of results that we want out of our philanthropic and fundraising efforts, they all start with that first gift. And the first gift can be a little trepidatious for some donors. Oftentimes they don't give a second gift. That's one thing we're going to talk about a lot in this session. In fact, we have data on that. First-time donors actually have the lowest retention rates of any other type. It's actually not a foregone conclusion at all that a first-time donor is going to give a second gift. It's actually the opposite. And I'll show you the data that backs that up. First-time donors are awesome. We had a huge amount of first-time donors in those early days of the pandemic. 2020 saw a huge influx of people that were making their first gifts to organizations, having kind of sat out of the philanthropic arena up until then. And that really sort of carried the sector through what were obviously a very tough couple of years. And like I said, all those great outcomes start with that first gift. And the last thing is, once someone lapses or stops giving or hasn't made that second gift, it can be really hard to get them to come back once you lose them. So once a first-time giver has lapsed, and we're going to kind of define lapse because it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, it's really hard to get them back. And I'm kind of a retention guy, and I usually say, hey, why don't we keep the donors we have rather than going out and acquiring new donors every single year just to kind of make up that gap. It's cheaper to retain a donor than it is to acquire one. It's easier in a lot of cases, and from my experience, it's a lot more fun because you've already got them. Something happened where they found you. You have appealed to them in some way. They've donated to you. Let's hold on to those people. So we're going to talk a lot about how do we move those donors from the first gift to the second gift, because once that happens, retention rates really skyrocket. There's a huge gap between retention rates of the first-time donor and the second donor or the second gift. This is data from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. This is what I mentioned early on in the presentation. If you're not familiar with FEP, check them out. They are a really cool resource. They're a collaboration between AFP, that's the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and the Urban Institute and Giving Tuesday. And they study donor retention every single year. They've been doing it since about 2006. I've been involved since around 2012, 2013. And I've kind of had a catbird seat of seeing the data usually a couple of days before it comes out. And what they do is they collaborate with a few of the leading donor management software providers. So Bloomerang, Keela, Donor Perfect, and Neon, they actually all collaborate, send their data to FEP on January 1st or thereabouts every single year. And FEP crunches the numbers of how well all those nonprofits who use those systems are doing at retaining their donors. It's around 10,000 organizations nationwide here in the States. And they crunch those numbers and pull out a report every single year. So this is looking at how many donors from 2020 came back and gave again in 2021. And if Lauren wants to have me back next year, we can look at the 2021 to 2022 donors for sure. It's always about a year behind just because this year hasn't finished. But what you can see here is that for all those nonprofits, they had an average retention rate of about 42%. So all their donors, all donor types, first-time donors, monthly donors, people that have given 10 gifts, 100 gifts, 1 gift, online, offline, $5, $500,000, all of them rolled up. About 42% of those people who gave in 2020 came back and gave in 2021. But the reason that I put this presentation together specifically is that first time rate, only about 19%, it was actually 18.6 or 18.4, I think, of those first time donors in 2020 came back and gave again in 2021. So much, much lower than the average. And you can see what happens when those first time donors give a second gift. Their retention rates more than triple to about 61%. So once you get a second gift from a donor, you're in really good shape, but it's pretty hard to do, right? This is definitely one challenge I think the sector is reckoning with right now, of getting that person who's given the first time to give a second time. And that keeps compounding the more they give, right? It's kind of like that law of thermodynamics. I'm not sure which one it was. I was an English major, but it's whatever one that says, an object in motion tends to stay in motion. That is somewhat true of donors. If you get a monthly commitment, super sticky, right? Upwards of 90%. But if you lose them, that recapture rate, that's the percentage of people who come back after missing a year of not giving, that's around 4%. So that's why I spend so much time on this issue, because you get the most bang for your buck, in my opinion. I'm going to kind of make that case over the next hour of that conversion from the first gift to the second gift. In my mind, it's even more important than acquisition, right? When you think of lifetime value, if you spend more to acquire a gift, right, an acquisition cost than the actual donation amount. So say you spend, $25 to acquire a $20 gift. I know it's hard to calculate an acquisition cost for one donor, but if that is the case, you've lost money on that transaction. And then to only retain 19% or 20% of those people, that can kind of be a losing proposition. You've got some negative ROI on all those efforts. So this is a really good place to spend your time because you get a lot of bang for your buck here. So not only is that 19% rate pretty low, right? It's less than 8 out of 10 of your donors. It's been dropping over the last 5 years or so. So back in 2015, it was around 25%, and now is below 20% for the last 2 years running. So a couple of things here. One is, even though we're at 18.6 or 19% right now, I'm actually pretty heartened by that number. Yeah, it's low and it's on the decline. But if you look at some of the other research that FEP and a lot of other people have been putting out, Giving USA, we had, and I mentioned this before, or alluded to it at least, we had a huge influx of donors in 2020 across the board, not just first-time donors, but a lot of people kind of stepped up due to the pandemic and gave in huge numbers. And I know not everyone necessarily saw that on an individual level, but giving was up, upwards of 2% over the last 2 years. And there was a huge, huge influx of first-time donors. So the fact that we're pretty much flat over the last 2 years, I think is a good sign, because by and large, a lot of those people stuck around rather than kind of, not giving again, which I think is what a lot of people thought would happen, due to it being, just a crisis donation, or kind of mirroring, natural disaster donations where, hey, there's a huge influx of cash and then those people never give again. That didn't really happen. It's slowing a little bit into 2022. One thing that FEP does is they look at each year on a quarterly basis. So you can go to the AFP website and the FEP subpage right now and see the first quarter data. You don't have to wait until next year to see some of the data. It's slowing a little bit, but not as much as what I think a lot of people thought would happen maybe in the later days of 2020, those people would just kind of go away once the pandemic, was over. And I don't think it's over. We're still in a pandemic in a lot of ways. But that was kind of the, prevailing notion. So pretty much flat. Now, there's a lot of theories on why this is happening. For whatever reason, it seems to be getting harder to get first-time donors to give a second gift, right? If this is what this data is reflecting. Why is it happening? Well, a lot of theories. Me personally, I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. There has never been more philanthropic activity right now, right? It's very easy to become a donor. That barrier to entry to giving, if there ever was one, is now almost non-existent, right? We have peer-to-peer giving, we have text to give. You can go on Facebook and click donate and it happens right away, like, in a nanosecond. It's very easy to give, right? And this means that more people have access to become a donor. But the flip side is that very often those methods or modes of giving are very transactional, right? They're kind of spur of the moment. Maybe we capture someone's attention, lightning in a bottle, they give. This certainly happens with peer-to-peer where they're giving to support, their friend, Lauren, who's doing a fundraiser. They're not necessarily supporting the cause, right? So there isn't a lot of reason to give a second time. So a lot of these things, which I think all those things are good at the end of the day, right? We're getting more revenue through donations, more donors, that's great. But one thing we may have to reckon with as a sector is that it's just going to be harder to keep some of these people. And some of those people, and I'm going to make a case for this, and this may sound counterintuitive to the presentation, maybe we shouldn't worry about keeping some of those people. And we'll talk about, kind of how and when to make those decisions. So there's that, right? Maybe this 20% is what we're going to settle into as a sector, and there's not much that we can do to change it. So I'm going to make the case for, can you improve it by 1 or 2%? If you do so, that actually can be a lot of extra revenue for your organization. I'll kind of show you the math of that here in a second. And then the second thing is these 20% of people that are going to be giving, further on down the road, year after year, how can we identify them as fast as possible, get in front of them and start building those relationships so that we can generate those outcomes, maybe a little bit faster than would kind of normally occur. So the goal here is not 100% retention, not possible, right? And anyone who says that, you should definitely be squinting your eyes at. Can you move this to 25% first time donation? Maybe. Can you move it to 21 or 22? Maybe. And if you did that, that would be actually a pretty powerful thing, even though it's a couple percentage points. My friends at Bloomerang, they have this spreadsheet available on their website where you can plug in your numbers and see what a change in retention would do for your organization. I know this is super busy and it's Monday and you got this dorky guy talking to you over Zoom, but you can plug your numbers in if you want to later on and see, wow, a couple percentage point difference. It's like compounding interest, right? It's what happens to our retirement savings, hopefully, if that's what's going on. It's really kind of magical. This is comparing two pretend organizations, one with a 20% first-time retention rate and one with a 30% first-time retention rate. So a 10% increase, so a little bit more aggressive than I was laying out there. And man, if you can get the 30%, that it would be huge. That is really awesome. So the kind of pretend numbers here are, they've got an average gift size of $200, which is probably a little on the high end for sure. They're generating about 500 new donors a year. If you can change your retention rate by just 10%, that is almost $250,000 from that 10% increase that you're going to get over the lifetime of their giving. And you can plug in your numbers for, all your average rates and see, but what I want to hit home is that it does not take much in terms of a percentage change of retention to make a really big difference. So 1% increase, 5%, this is a 10% increase, that can be really, really powerful for your organization. So, don't be discouraged that that's our average rate of 20% and think, oh, dang, how can I even do any better than that? It doesn't really take that much to make a really big difference for your bottom line. So, why are we at 20%? Some other things that I think are happening here. Talked about this a little bit. When people give online, it's kind of transactional, right? I wrote a whole book about this, which you can check out if you want, but you give online, you get automated messages, you get kind of, automatic receipts. No one talks to you. You're kind of left feeling cold. Sometimes those networks don't even give you the donor information, so you can't reach out even if you wanted to. And then internally as organizations, do we have, kind of eyes open on when someone has given for the first time? I personally think that this should be something that is celebrated, culturally within the organization. Like, wow, we convinced a new person, a stranger, to support our mission. Do we know when that happens? That is kind of the first step of stewarding those people, right? And letting them know that we see them and starting to build that relationship. And we'll talk about relationships here later on. Sometimes first-time donors don't give a lot, and that is to be, assumed, right? It's someone that is giving for the first time. There's not much of a relationship there. Maybe they're really into what you do, but it's not often that someone just drops, 5-6-figure gift in your lap as their first gift. Usually they start off as $5 or $25. And I get it. We're real busy. Laura and I were talking about this before. Everyone is just swamped with so many things to do. And you're not going to throw a parade for every $5 donor. I get that. And I'm not going to recommend that to you. But are there some other signals besides gift amount that we can look for that may say, hey, maybe we might want to prioritize a little bit of time on this person versus other people, that let's kind of continue communicating to them in kind of an automated or semi-automated way. So we'll talk about how to kind of split those paths. Speaking of automation, sometimes it's one size fits all. First-time donors are very different types of people, even though they are all first-time donors. So again, looking for those signals so that we can kind of segment the communication so it doesn't feel like a one-size-fits-all approach. And then the last thing is showing some curiosity about these people. They're a stranger to us. We are somewhat of a stranger to them, even though they are donating to us. They may not totally have a full picture, right, of the breadth and width of the services that we provide, all the great things we do for the environment here in New Jersey, right? They may not totally understand that. So educating them and also allowing them to, maybe not educate is the right word, but inform us about why they care about the environment, right? Why they are passionate about this cause. Knowing that piece of information, I'm going to kind of, spoil myself here, but I think that knowing why someone gives is the most important data point that we can have on a donor. And the faster you can get that, the faster you can start to tailor those communications to that person. So why don't we get in a little bit to donor psychology? And we could spend days on this. There are so many great and spanning decades of research into why donors give, why donors stop giving. There's people like Adrian Sargent, Penelope Burke, Ken Burnett, Donor Voice. If you could go out and Google and find really awesome studies with, somewhat different methodologies, but basically asking donors, hey, why do you keep giving? And why did you stop giving to these organizations? And most of them come to the same conclusions. Donors want to be thanked. They want to know the impact of their gift. And they want to start that relationship with an organization, right? They want some kind of personal connection. And a lot of people, will define that as donor stewardship or donor love. and those are kind of buzzwordy terms that are floating around webinars like this and blog posts. I was sort of struck by a very recent piece of research that came out. Oops, I went too far. Actually, in my neck of the woods, the Lilly School of Philanthropy here in Indy, great institution. They have they put out a lot of really awesome research, not just on donor loyalty, but on a myriad of topics. And you can check out their website and fill probably your entire weekend if you wanted reading some really interesting research. They put out this study back in February of this year, where they had sort of organized a cohort of nonprofits here in Indianapolis of all different cause types. I think there was a YMCA, there was like an LGBTQ youth organization, wide swath, and they surveyed their donors on the organization's behalf. They actually had hoped to survey non-donors in the community as well, but they kind of had scope creep, and they ended up just talking to the donors of these organizations and basically said, hey, what are your philanthropic plans? We're almost 2 years into the pandemic. Do you plan on continuing to give at the same amount? And also, why have you been giving to these organizations? What is it that they do that has kind of kept you around for year after year? I didn't really, there were 10 sort of findings here. I only grabbed 4 of them that were sort of germane to this topic. But the COVID sort of, do you plan on continuing to give at the level you have been, which was an increase due to the pandemic, mind you? A lot of those people said, yeah, we're going to give as much, if not more. So, and there's been a lot of studies, Giving USA, Penelope Burke, that are kind of suggesting that people don't plan on slowing down. This is just an aside. I thought that was a really awesome and positive thing to see. But in terms of sort of the donor commitment questions, people said, yeah, we want to know, like, what are the programs and services? What is the impact that these organizations are making? That sort of information back to me keeps me engaged. Personal connections with someone at the organization, right? Or a previous relationship with someone at the organization is very meaningful to me. And then engaging content. So images, videos, again, around sort of the impact that those services or programs are making. So again and again, every time one of these research studies comes out, and I've been giving a variation of this presentation for almost 10 years, and every year or two, I just swap it out with the newest research. It basically says the same thing as its predecessor, which is acknowledgements, impact storytelling, and building that personal relationship. And I would argue that the first-time donor, that person who's made their first and only gift so far, we hope, that is the best place to sort of hone these efforts. Selectively, we're going to talk about sort of how to do this selectively, but to get that relationship off on a good start, can we move that 20% to 25%, maybe even 30%? That will be transformational for the organization. So when I think of kind of a checklist, and this applies to all donors, right? But how you do it to different donor types is a little nuanced, right? A major donor that's been giving to you for 20 years, they don't need a welcome kit, right? They don't need to be informed about all the things that your organization does. They know, right? They may want to be updated, right? And the same may go for monthly donors, those people in long-term commitments. But for first-time donors, I think it's really important to kind of take that, education stance, because they may not totally understand all the things that you do. Keep them updated. Tell them what they are going to get from you. Donors like to know kind of what to expect from your organizations. Hey, thanks for your first gift. Be on the lookout for our newsletter. These are the kinds of things we send out periodically. This is a great, letter from our ED that goes out quarterly. I just wanted to send you the latest one, so you don't have to wait for 3 months for the next one. Give them a sense of what it is that's going to come out, and then get to know them. Like I said, if you can ascertain information about them, that's just the sooner that you can sort of start to apply it to your subsequent communications. Why did they give? How did they hear about you? Why do they care about environmental issues? If you can sort of parse that information out, you will find the 20% that are going to be retained a lot faster, and you can sort of start to not worry about maybe that other 70 to 80%. And I am recommending, at least on some level, that you not necessarily worry about some of those people, depending on their modes of giving, why they give, and we're going to talk about these things. So I know this is overwhelming, and you all are wearing so many different hats. Some of you are one-person shops. I feel for you. My wife has been a small shop fundraiser for many, many years. This is who I have, served the last decade or so. This is a lot. So I'm going to give you kind of some cheat codes for how you can kind of separate, okay, who should we really be focusing on? If you have a high gift volume, if you are in that camp where maybe you are getting like 500 new gifts a year, there's no way that you can necessarily be writing handwritten notes to all of them or making videos for all of them. Those are good things to do, but how can you kind of find those special people based on some of the signals that they're giving? So let me give you a little bit of a cheat sheet here. So I come from the donor database world where, we collect and store donor information for our clients. And the more that our clients do that, the more they can sort of parse out and segment different types of people that may be worthy of their time versus some people that, are probably never going to give again. And that's okay. And we're going to talk about those people. So first-time donor is a really big group. It's almost too homogenous a group to even talk about, right? It's just a frequency of their giving. But us as human beings, we give for different reasons, right? We give at different levels. We give to different campaigns at different times a year. We may also match gifts from our employers. We may have previous history with the organization where, it was our first gift, but it wasn't our first interaction with the nonprofit. If you can look at these and start to kind of filter out these individual signals, not just within first-time donors, but a lot of these apply to many different types of donors, that's where you can kind of find like, okay, maybe here we got 500 people, we can only call 10 people or whatever that number is. Who are we going to call? Well, there are some common sense things we might want to pay attention to. Gift amount, is a quick one that comes to mind. If you got 2 gifts today, 2 first-time donors, one gave you $1,000 and one gave you $10, and you can only call one, you probably don't need someone like me to suggest which one you should call, right? It's probably the $1,000 one. Maybe it actually may not be if you layer in some of these other things. Someone may have just come to an event, they got invited by a friend, they're wealthy, them writing $1,000 check isn't really a big deal, but they've never given to an environmental cause. They don't live in New Jersey. This is why when you are looking at these other data points, it can be really, really powerful to kind of guide your efforts rather than just saying, we're going to call every donor, or dang, we have too many donors and we're not going to call any, and just kind of throw your heads up in the air and give up. So I've kind of broken this up into 3 categories. A group where it might be worth really reaching out to these people. Definitely want to get them a welcome kit. Can we send them a handwritten note or a little personal video? I'll show you some examples of what I mean by video here in a second. Phone calls I've mentioned a couple times. Was their first gift the first gift in a monthly commitment? That sometimes happens where they start a monthly gift having never given before. I may pay attention to that person because they immediately go right into the 90th percentile of retention rates, and monthly giving, that's a signal for lots of other things, but bequest giving, which type of major gift, that's some good things happening there. Do you have a wealth screening tool? I don't sell wealth screening. I don't have a pony in that race at all, but that can be interesting to look at. Okay, this person, they seem to have some capacity. They give to other environmental causes. That may be someone we might want to circle or highlight in the database in some way. Have they been a long-time volunteer and now are also giving in addition to that volunteerism? If they're doing 2 things, volunteerism and giving, those are pretty strong signals that, hey, we might want to, pay attention to this person. It's also someone that maybe we're not going to send a welcome kit to because they've been volunteering and they know that could be potentially embarrassing. It's kind of sometimes these embarrassing moments happen, and maybe that creates that retention rate where it's like you're sending welcome kits to people that they already know you and they may even be somewhat offended by that. So again, the more you can look at these signals, it can kind of keep you out of trouble. Did they go through the trouble of doing a matching gift from their employer, which is kind of a pain on the employee's part, right? You got to go to HR, get it approved in a lot of cases, and then they got to cut the check. But that kind of work or that effort, again, is showing that they really care about you and they care enough to, double the impact of their gift. Are they an out-of-town donor? So this one, I got a personal story coming up for you here in a second. But for you all, you're all in New Jersey, right, Lauren? You're all in New Jersey. You have kind of a hyper-local footprint. If someone from Iowa or Nevada or Indiana gave to you, that would be kind of weird, right? And you might think, what's going on there? There may be a story. Can we kind of root that out? And I'll tell you that personal story here in a second that'll kind of illuminate what I mean by that. And then, that gift size, like I mentioned before. Are they connected maybe to someone else in the organization? Those are all things that might trigger that more personal outreach. Then maybe in between, hey, there's someone that used to work here. They used to be a board member. Maybe they were even someone that was a service recipient of some kind. Again, they may not need a welcome kit per se, but you might want to, reach out and just kind of acknowledge like, hey, that's really awesome that you gave. And then there are people that may never give again. Peer-to-peer is a big one. I love peer-to-peer. I think peer-to-peer is great. The cost to acquire peer-to-peer donors is a lot lower than most other channels. It's almost free money, if you kind of forgive the crude expression there. But again, those people are typically giving to the peer, not to you. They're giving to their old college roommate who is raising money for you. They may not even necessarily know what the money is going to or care about your cause if they even know about it. Don't worry about it. Those people, I think you can feel good pressing and releasing. Now, I will give you some tips on maybe how you can capture some of those people. I wouldn't totally write them off, but again, it's a different outreach mechanism than some of these other sort of subsets of donors. Event retention rates, not a lot lower, but a little bit lower retention rates. Again, that example where, somebody invited their buddy to fill out the table. They don't really know you very much, so looking at those signals and kind of deciding. Giving Tuesday, again, that's a good thing in my opinion. It generates a lot of philanthropic activity, but a lot of it is kind of spur of the moment. People are spreading their dollars around. And there may not be that much of a commitment there, with some exceptions, and we will get into those here in a second. So look for these things. If you have a database, if you're using like Bloomerang or Razor's Edge or Salesforce, you should be able to kind of set up reporting. You have your new donors this week, and then add in filters or queries or whatever your system does. Like, hey, are they a monthly donor? People not in New Jersey, matching gifts. You should be able, in whatever system you're using, to add these filters, and you can kind of whittle down those first-time donors into perhaps a more manageable group. Now, if you're getting 1 or 2 new gifts a week or a month, you may be able to get to all these people with some of the things I'm going to suggest here, and that's great. But if you have a high gift volume and you're feeling overwhelmed, this would be maybe a good place to kind of parse out those people. Even if you have a low gift volume and you can get to everybody, still knowing these things or examples like these on the screen, I think can kind of help you in whatever outreach you do. So here's a sample kind of timeline. This is something that is not going to apply to every 1.4 million nonprofits or however many we have here in the States now, but it can kind of be a good jumping off point. Get a thank you, a personal thank you in front of them within a couple days if you can. It will surprise them. The amount of times that a nonprofit has called me when I became a first-time donor, I can count on one hand. but I'm still giving to all those people. It's shocking in our day and age to get a phone call from a board member or an ED or a handwritten note, a couple of days later, just saying, hey, we see you. We saw that you joined our community of donors. Thank you for your first gift. I wish I had said this earlier in the presentation, but if you can tell the donor what kind of donor they are, that's really powerful. It shows that you're paying attention, and everything you say afterwards will kind of flow from that. Thanks for joining the family of donors, or thanks for joining the fight in protecting the beautiful environment here in our state. Get them in that fight with you, and the first kind of step in getting them in that fight is welcoming them to that fight, right? The welcome kit, within a week, I'll show you some examples of maybe what you might want to put in that welcome kit, but educate them about the mission, again, because they may not totally understand the breadth and width of all the things that you do. A survey or a tour, getting to know them is the goal here. A survey, we'll look at some sample surveys here in a second. A tour is just as good, but the point is that they see you in action, right? If you can maybe have them out to that beautiful lake that Lauren is at, or the Jersey Shore, or whatever it is that you're trying to protect, if they see that, if they haven't already seen it, I don't know, I suppose they probably already would have seen that in some capacity, but a cleanup day or whatever it is you all are doing out in the field, I'm showing my ignorance a little bit, but that will get them hooked. And if you have them out in person, you will most likely have some chit chat, right? You may find, oh yeah, I grew up here, I've since moved away, but this is somewhere that is very meaningful to me. You'll get those stories, you'll get that reason for giving, which is so, so powerful in kind of crafting your subsequent communication. More stewardship, hey, this is a picture or a video from a recent project we just finished. Just wanted to keep you up to date. And then asking them for the second gift, doing so quickly. 90 days, I know seems a little aggressive, but there's a lot of interesting research to show that that is actually the window of opportunity. You don't have to wait a year or till the next Giving Tuesday or the next year end to ask them to give again. In fact, the faster you get that second gift, the more you can start to capitalize on that lifetime value that I mentioned before, my little kind of crazy spreadsheet there. So let's talk about welcome kits a little bit. I got some examples for you. A dedicated letter that you're only sending to first-time donors. The point of this is no other type of donor gets this stuff. It would be nonsensical to send this to a long-time donor or a monthly donor. And that's when communications, are really good. It's when they would not make any sense to send to anybody else. Just be careful, because if they are actually not a first-time donor, if maybe something weird happened with the data, that could be a little embarrassing. But welcome them. Dear Lauren, thank you so much for joining our fight to clean up, the shoreline here in New Jersey. Let them know that that they are a first-time donor, right? Celebrate that. Tell them what segment they're in. This applies to everybody. Thanks for becoming a monthly donor. Thanks for donating to our capital campaign. Thanks for giving on Giving Tuesday. That is a really good thing to do in general, but very important here for first-time donors. Said this a couple times, but inform them. Hey, we know you donated, but these are all the things that we're up to. We're a statewide organization. Maybe you didn't realize that, or hey, we got this awesome thing going on that we just broke ground on, or we just got a grant for. Let them know the great things that you're doing. Again, this is a good place for a tour invitation or a survey. It's a great time to visit our offices if our offices make sense to visit, or come out to the lake and see what we're up to. Get them on site or get some information from them, and you can kind of divide and conquer. I'll show you some examples of how to do that here. And then maybe you might want to include a little trinket item, a sticker they can put on the back of their Subaru, or on their Nalgene water bottle, or a little postcard to put on their fridge, something that creates a little bit of stickiness physically between them and the organization. So a couple of examples that I've gotten over the years that I thought were good. It's a subjective thing for sure, but kind of check all those boxes in terms of what the research says. I gave to Girls Inc. here in Indy when my daughter was born, which was kind of a lame reason to start giving to Girls Inc. But I did it, better late than never, right? And nice welcome letter. Thanks for joining. You're now part. I think, yeah, you're now part of our family. Some kind of collective language there that's good. Hand signed, shows that they didn't just spit it out of the database in 5 seconds and stuff it in an envelope. They included some literature, and then their version of that trinket or that swag was a little flower pot seed packet, which you can just put in a little pot and it sprouted, I think, a sunflower or something like that. That was kind of clever. It sort of connected to the mission. Again, something that sort of connects to the mission is good there. So that was nice. This is one I got from a school in Jacksonville that I donated to randomly. I remember what the actual connection was there, but they involved the kids in that trinket item. So they sent a little piece of artwork that the kids had been made. So you got to be a little careful about it involving, service recipients, but I thought they did this in kind of a nice, respectful way. Handwritten element that was a magnet, or a sticker is just as good. I'm Gen X, so I tend to like magnets a little more than stickers, but stickers are good too. And then, again, some literature about the organization, which I thought was kind of clever there. This is another one from a school here in Indy. This one I think is rather ingenious in its sort of levity. So it's very simple. Again, thank you for your first gift. So I can't hammer this home enough that telling the donor that they're a first-time donor is good. But they sort of make a connection between the donor and the kids at the school. So it's my first gift, and then they're showing first day, first field trip, first memories. So making a connection between the mission and the donor, and the school is kind of backing out of the picture, right? Which I think is makes sense in this particular piece. It doesn't always make sense. You don't want to, remove your organization from everything, but I thought it was very rather brilliant in this case. And then there was a tour invitation. So obviously a school is kind of a dead ringer for tours. And if you are an organization that, doesn't have a physical location indoors necessarily, or kids and animals, it's like they have an unfair advantage. But you all got forests and lakes, so it's not dissimilar. But every day is a great day to visit. To see your gift at work, steal that line. Like, they won't mind. They won't even know. Nathan, their head of fundraising, is a great guy. He would be happy to bequeath it to you, I'm sure. But to see your gift at work through a personal visitor tour, such a magical sentence, because you're immediately tying their donation to the impact that your organization is making. Hard to say no to. And let me tell you, the people who show up to these tours, it's not gonna be everybody, probably less than 10%, maybe less than 5% of people who get this. Those are your people, right? That's your 20% that you want to circle and keep an eye on, because those are some special donors of the future for sure. It doesn't have to be physical mail. A simple plain email can be just as powerful, if not more powerful, than some of these examples I showed you. This is one where I made a first gift to the organization, and it was also the first of a monthly commitment. So that's a strong signal, by the way. And I kind of glossed over that before in my chart, but if their first gift is a monthly commitment, keep an eye on those folks. And I got a thank you letter in the mail, kind of the templated letter, which is fine. I got the email confirmation, which is fine. But then a couple of days later, I got a personal, you can see on the screen, plain text email from the director of development, Mike. He's a great guy, that just said, hey, thanks for becoming a monthly donor. You're going to do so many great things for us through your monthly commitment. I made you a quick 2-minute video to share what your gift does for us. And you can watch it later on. The URL is there if you want. I didn't want to take up too much time. It's always a gamble to show videos on these things, but it was a straight to the camera webcam video from Mike to me. It was a video made for me. He literally recorded it only for that purpose. Totally disposable. It was only going to be watched by me and then whatever group I tend to be presenting to that watches it. He gets little notifications every time somebody watches it. He's like, oh, Steven, you must be presenting somewhere. Somebody watched my video from 5 years ago. So that's okay. But it was so powerful. I had never gotten one of these before. I actually have never gotten one since. I think more people should do this because it absolutely knocked my socks off, and we still give to these folks. But it was, hey, Steven, hey, he mentioned my wife, Leah, as well, which is really smart because it was a household gift. Thanks for giving. I just wanted to tell you a quick story about what monthly donors mean for our organization. We do strategy sessions once a quarter, and without monthly donors, we couldn't afford to take all that time off and kind of shut the office down and get really strategic for a day without support like you. So he, again, kind of brilliantly, I think, tied the specific monthly donation to that specific kind of, usage of those funds, right? It wasn't like, hey, your $25 pays 1/18 of our electric bill. It didn't get like that detailed, but there was something it was tied to, which I thought was really smart. And I actually emailed him and said, hey, Mike, this is awesome. I talk about donor communications for a living. Can you tell me more about these videos? Because I've never gotten one of these. He said, yeah, I do these videos anytime we get, he kind of had a matrix like I showed you that like qualifies people for videos, which sounds a little shrewd, but again, you got to make, you got to divide and conquer with your time. And it's been a while since I talked to him, but I think some of the groups were new monthly donations, new people joining the monthly gift program. And I think, gifts over a certain dollar amount was another signal. And then people that had renewed after so many years, maybe 3 or 5 years, something like that. But he had kind of defined what they thought was meaningful to them, right? And he would send videos. And he even joked that it was easier to send a video than it was to spin up the gift acknowledgement letter in the database, which wasn't a knock against the database. Just he got so good at these videos. There's no editing. He just talks right into the camera. There's some ums and ahs, just like there have been in this presentation. Hopefully you've forgiven that, but he didn't let it bother him. And it came off as so authentic that I didn't even notice as I was watching it. And you can watch it and be a judge for yourself. But maybe something you might want to try, especially if you're like Lauren and you're out on that beautiful lake, and you could maybe turn the camera around and say, hey, look at this beautiful, environment that we're protecting. Like, you all are in a good position to maybe do some things like this because you have something beautiful to show in a lot of cases, I would assume. Surveys are awesome things to maybe weave into some of those communications, the thank you letter, the welcome kit, the email confirmation. I love donor surveys in general. I think they're really powerful, but I really love them for first-time donors because you can ask specific questions of first-time donors that you wouldn't ask of any other donor, like, how did you find us? Why did you give? But also because knowing that information later on or sooner rather than later can be really powerful because you can kind of craft the communications based on those answers. So let me tell you why, as an example, I think this is powerful. Let's say that you do my little, matrix of donor signals, and you get to the end of it and you're like, dang, these donors look pretty similar, right? They both gave online through our website. They both gave on Giving Tuesday. They both gave $50. And they both live here in the city we operate in, or, a 10-mile radius. And it's like, it would be very tempting to treat those donors similarly, right? You send them the same welcome kit, you put them into the same cadence or whatever for your communications. But if you had one more piece of information, which is why they gave, you may find that it would be better, your time would be better spent spending time on one rather than the other. If you ask them and both of them responded and one of them says, you know what, just climate change has been on my mind and it was just the last straw for me. I felt like I had to do something, so I want to support you. Versus the other person where it's like, yeah, I knew it was Giving Tuesday and I saw a lot of my friends were giving and I thought I had an extra, $250 and I spread that out to some organizations that, were kind of close to me, but whatever. Those are very different donors, right? Even though in the database, they look really similar. And that's why if you can add in as many of these signals, you can start to kind of parse these people out. Another example might be, oh yeah, I had a grandmother who died of Alzheimer's. If you're an organization that, is in that arena. Or, I used to live here in New Jersey and now I don't anymore. And I wanted to protect those environments that I grew up in. You see the power of knowing this information. And if someone responds to a survey just by responding, it doesn't really necessarily matter what they say in it, although what they say is good, but they are sort of opting into a more engaged group by just responding to the survey. So that alone is an engagement signal besides the information that they give you. So it's a good thing to send out. So I think there are some kind of sneaky good places to weave in the survey. For online gifts, you're already sending two things in an automated way, like that confirmation page, the page or website that they are sent to after they fill out their credit card number and hit donate. That's a good place for, hey, what prompted your gift today? Type in this little box. Same thing in that confirmation email, that automatic receipt that goes out, slip in that little bit of a link. You will get less than a 10% response rate. That's okay. But those 10% of people, again, they are sort of opting into a more engaged group. If you call donors to say thank you, you can ask them, just real quick, hey, by the way, what prompted the gift? Why do you care about what we do? You could link to it. Heck, you could send a paper survey with a VRE in the welcome kit. That might be an interesting thing to try as well. And then you can, of course, just send a one-off email, kind of like what Mike did with the video, but maybe instead of the video or in addition to, there's a little link to a survey there. So I'm going to tell that personal story that I alluded to before that I think will kind of bring this all together. This is a screenshot from my household budget. This is where we are tracking our monthly giving to the organizations my wife and I support. She doesn't mind that I show this. It's not a lot of money. It's like $250, but we're sort of proud of it. And most of the organizations that we give to are here in Indianapolis, where I'm talking to you from. One of them is a national organization, but another organization is not here in Indy or national. It's at Buzzards Bay. It's the bottom one. Buzzards Bay, it's actually closer to you than it is to me. It's a little body of water between Cape Cod and the south coast of Massachusetts. So I've been a monthly giver to them for many years. And I don't know if maybe the people at Buzzards Bay went through this sort of exercise that they laid out for you, but if they had, they would have found that I fell into at least 3, maybe 4 of the categories that I laid out here. My first gift was the start of a monthly commitment, which we've been doing for years. I'm out of town, right? I'm in Indiana. It might be above average, 25 times 12. I'm not really sure what their average gift size is. Maybe it's in the middle somewhere. But I'm also a previous and current service recipient. Anybody guess why? Can anybody guess why I donate to these folks? Put it in the chat if you have a guess. If you guessed it's because I used to live there, you'd be right. I actually grew up here. And when I said to myself, when I become a fully functioning adult, which is debatable depending on who you ask, but I said, I want to give back to these people because we vacation there. I like to bring my son and my daughter there and pal around where I used to hang out. And I have a feeling that either they have seen this presentation or they did some simple, 6 minutes of research on me. And they have found that, oh yeah, first of all, it's weird that somebody from Indiana would give to us because it's this hyper kind of local environmental organization, but they do a good job. They really welcome me into the family of donors. They send me stickers and a handwritten note when I joined, and they keep me up to date with their newsletter, and I get their stuff in the mail. And we actually went to New Bedford, Massachusetts over the summer a couple of months ago, and we walked by their office, and that was kind of fun to see that. I didn't go in and bother them, but that was a good thing because I am a really good prospect for them for future giving. The Quest, if they ever did like a capital campaign, I should be on not a short list, but maybe a semi-short list because I check all those boxes. Jerry Panis, before he passed away, he did a research study into all the clients that his firm had generated the quests for. And he found that it's not necessarily wealthy people or the elderly that are most likely to leave bequests, although those are usually there on the list somewhere, but it's people that have been giving for a long period of time, people that have a personal connection with the organization. So I didn't just kind of pick those little signals out of a hat in my little matrix there. This has been proven to be signals that you want to look out for. Oh, and then the monthly giving is a really good signal there. So good on them for paying attention. So you might want to do that. That might actually be a fun exercise for you to go in your database and say, how many donors outside of New Jersey? And maybe extend that beyond New York and some of the neighboring states for sure. But dang, if you've got an Idahoan or a Nebraskan or something in there, hey, maybe they used to live in New Jersey and they care about protecting the wildlife or the environment there. That might be someone that you might want to at least strike up a conversation with and see what's going on. Phone calls. And I'll kind of wrap up here because I know we're coming up against it, Lauren, but phone calls are really powerful. Bloomerang did a study back in 2020 where they looked at their clients who called first-time donors versus the ones who don't. And they found massive increases in retention rates. So from about a 33% average, so their clients already had a higher than average retention rate, which is awesome, but they went even higher to almost 60% if they got at least one phone call within the first 90 days of the gift. They also got more money from the second gift, and that second gift came in faster than the people who did give a second gift but were not called. So again, phone calls may be something else you might want to weave into. I know I'm giving you so much to do. It's like welcome kits, phone calls, videos, handwritten notes, divide and conquer, right? That's why I give you that sort of matrix so you can kind of decide who would be best to get these things. But the more you can do, the better, because all these things are good. I think mostly because it will surprise the donor that you are even reaching out in this kind of impersonal world, that we live in. I talked about this before, but peer-to-peer, usually the connection is with the fundraiser, not you, the org. That's okay. But if you have time, and if you do get the donor information, which I know we don't always get it from, Facebook or whatever, maybe weave in that fundraiser in the acknowledgement. If I'm given to my college roommate who's doing their birthday fundraiser on Facebook, maybe the thank you should mention the college roommate or come from them. Dear Stephen, thanks so much for, donating to my birthday fundraiser. You may not realize it, but I was raising money for this organization. I would love it if you considered supporting them even beyond this. Now, let me tell you a little bit of what they do. So contextualize it, right? I think a lot of times you just kind of swoop in. It's like, hey, thanks for donating. And it's like, whoa, what? I don't even remember donating to you. What is this? They may not even realize what organization is being supported. They wanted to be added to that, ticker board on Facebook for those donations. I'll show you an example of one where I got something like that. I donated to my friend Adam. It was a Facebook fundraiser. He was supporting a women's shelter, I believe is what Cover in Place is. Awesome organization. I've since gotten to know them, but I thought it was really smart that they acknowledged that, hey, thanks for donating to that fundraiser. I'd love to have you in for a tour and show you what we do. So you're kind of reintroducing yourself to the donor, even though that they have already donated. And it's a little backwards, but that may be one way to sort of grab a few of those people. A lot of these people, though, I think are going to be kind of in that bless and release camp. And that's okay, because the fundraiser generated that money for you. You probably didn't have to spend any time or effort doing that. Now, I will say one more thing about this. Make sure the fundraiser is thanked. A lot of times that person gets forgotten, right? It's like, oh, how are we going to thank all these people that they brought in? Facebook isn't giving us their email addresses. I wouldn't worry about it. I would make sure Adam or the college roommate or whatever, make sure, hey, that was so awesome that you did a birthday fundraiser for us. You raised $500 for us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Just like shower all your energy on that person because you want them to go and do it again next year or next Giving Tuesday or whatever. And then the second gift, last thing, the faster you get it, the more lifetime value. This was an interesting study done by the analytical ones a couple of years ago. It's a little older, it's 1 or 2 years old, but they found again that 0 to 90-day window is where the most lifetime value is, right? You get a second gift within the first 90 days, then maybe they give again at the anniversary or the next year end. That's a good place. So if you are doing a lot of the stewardship, maybe you have learned something about them or impressed them enough or informed them enough that they give again. Don't be afraid to ask those people, because that's where sort of the biggest lifetime value bang for your buck is. And one thing to call out here is not much difference in 12 months to 24 months. So we've been talking about retention on a yearly basis. I think it's okay to let it go 18 to 24 months before you totally consider that person lapsed. I mean, people give on their own schedules. I wouldn't hit the panic button when, the clock strikes midnight on the 365th day since their last gift. People give on their own schedules. Don't call someone lapsed. It's like, what are you even talking about? I don't think I'm lapsed. So, just be careful with those kind of time frames there. So that's it. Create a framework where when new donations are coming in. Separate those people into sub segments as much as you can, because first time donors, again, is too homogenous a group to really do much with. If anything on its own, prioritize your time. I know you're swamped. Can you call one donor a day, one donor a week? Can you make one video a month? And kind of decide where that makes the most sense. And if you have some success, maybe you can start to iterate on it and add on to it. And see where, you start to have diminishing returns, if at all. Maybe you won't be. Surveys, powerful piece of information to kind of know that about the donor. And then again, you're not going to get to 100% retention. It's not possible. And a lot of those people, they may just want kind of a one and done from you. And we should respect that, right? And if we can identify those people quickly, then all the better, because we don't have to worry about them or waste time and effort. So I know I blabbed on past 4 o'clock, Lauren, I'm sorry about that. But if people want to hang out and ask questions, or if you're watching this as a recording and you want to shoot me a message, I would love to hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you want, because, we can keep the conversation going for sure. But thank you. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Steve. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a quick question.
For Amanda.
Hi, Steve. I'm Amanda. I love Cape Cod too. So
yeah,
you woke me up with Buzzards Bay.
Right
not to say that your whole presentation was not interesting. It was.
That's okay.
And so this concept of making donor calls, I wanted to touch on that because, it's sort of like a best management practice that a lot of people talk about. And I've experimented with it a bit. And I have found that the vast majority of people, myself included, screen their phone calls these days.
Oh, yeah.
And they never pick up. Very rarely. It's like so rare that anybody picks up. And in lieu of that, I've gone more to like a postcard approach or even an email. But nonetheless, I wanted to circle back, since people speak highly of the phone call technique, and see if you can give me any pointers, or I'm just sort of checking myself here. Like, am I doing something wrong that nobody picks up?
I'm not surprised to hear that at all. I don't think you're doing anything wrong. And one thing I forgot to mention, kind of the fine print of this study from Bloomerang, is they did not differentiate between donors who picked up and donors who were left a voicemail. So it was only if a call was logged in the database. I would imagine that a vast majority of these went to voicemail. And when I gave my example of, I can count the amount of nonprofits who have called me on one hand, those all went to voicemail, right? I'm 38. There's no way that me or anyone younger than me, I'm sure, is screening their calls. And I think everyone screens their calls, right? So I think voicemails are just as good. So that's one
good
thing.
To know. Yeah.
It's kind of like a digital thank you card, right? I do listen to voicemails. I don't know if there's any generational or demographic, research on that for sure, but I think it's okay. Now, the people who do pick up, that is an interesting group, right? Especially if they take the call well. A couple other things I would try though. One is, and I don't know how you're deciding who to call, but only people who give you a phone number, right? I'm not sure if you're going out and kind of like looking for their phone number or anything like that, but that can be a way to kind of decide who to call, right? If for example, someone donates online, they give you their phone number and that field is not required. So they're kind of, just giving it freely. That person, would be a good candidate to call. Another thing that comes into mind is there was some research from Penelope Burke, who does a donor survey every single year. It's kind of a cool thing. It's not free, but I find that it's worth the cost. It's Cygnus Research, CYGNUS Research, or Penelope Burke Donor Survey. You'll find her. And she found that when board members call, it's a little bit more powerful in terms of retention and their second gift size than if a staff person calls. So one thing you might want to try, if you've got maybe a board who's willing to help out, is maybe have some of those people call instead. And it may not make a difference in terms of pickup or voicemail, but if board members are leaving voicemails, maybe you can kind of compare the people you leave voicemails to the ones that they do and see if there's any differences there. But I think you're fine, honestly. I don't think that there's anyone that is having a lot of live pickup success in this day and age, and that will probably continue. And that's another reason why I think maybe these videos are an interesting, maybe not alternative, but something to try and compare to, because it kind of takes the pressure off. Like, you can watch it anytime, the recipient can open it at their leisure, but still hear someone's voice, see their face, which you can on a phone call. You probably wouldn't FaceTime and that'd be kind of weird. Or maybe you could try it, I don't know. And so that may be, something you could try instead of, if you're feeling like, hey, people aren't picking up, I'm getting no feedback on the voicemails, I can't really see in the data if they're making a difference. That may be a good reason to jump to the videos if you feel confident and comfortable on camera, for sure. But you might try the board member approach, or if you feel good about it and you just were worried that you're an outlier, I don't think you're an outlier at all. I think that, voicemails, at least according to this study, were just as good.
Thank you. That's really helpful feedback.
Yeah,
sometimes it's
you're
just
awesome.
like you get sick of talking to yourself, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
It's weird.
But it was good to hear that voicemails still make an impact. So thank you.
I think so. Yeah.
Any other questions for Steve before he vamooses? All right. Well, thank you again, Steve. And again, here is a way to contact Steve if something comes up and you're thinking about it. There's a lot of information. Thank you so much again, Steven. This is awesome. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. You guys are great. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.